Hello, my name is Erzsébet Csibi. I'm working for Pearson Central and Eastern Europe, and I'm an accountant manager for 12 countries in the region, and I'm also a qualified teacher trainer. Today, I would like to talk about assessment in higher education, which is probably a hot topic these days, but definitely a very important part of our teaching life and learning life. We will try to answer questions like what is assessment, what types of assessment there are, what are the benefits of assessing students, and how we can use assessments. I will also show some examples and give some useful tips on creating online tests. And I will also show you a tool which you can use. In the times of the pandemic, higher educational institutions reacted to the situation very differently. I made a little personal survey among people, and what most people said about exams was that everything was arranged online. They used different kinds of tools like MyLab, Zoom, Kahoot, Teams, whatever. And in some courses, instructors assess the activity during the course together with a longer essay. So there were different kinds of exams, different kinds of ways of assessment. I just would like to highlight some feedback or some comments. And most of the comments agreed that the difficulty, the biggest difficulty was the workload, and it has increased for both the students and the instructors. There were many challenges about what to use, how to test online, and how to avoid the usage of supplementary tools like textbooks or notes where necessary. But most of the people found a solution to the problem. And I just would like to focus on the last two quotes, which say that only those who can use a cheat sheet, only those can use a cheat sheet who have done some studying. And I think this is worth remembering when we are worried about cheating in an online test. And some people said that they heavily build on the fact that we are not studying for the school. We don't study for the school, but we if we cheat, we cheat ourselves in the first place. So when you are going on unknown territory with online testing or even different kinds of testing, just keep these in mind. First of all, I would like to mention the 5E learning cycle as a basis and part of the assessment topic. The 5E learning cycle is an instructional design model that defines a learning sequence based on the experiential learning philosophy of John Dewey and the experiential learning cycle proposed by David Kolb. So the first part of the learning cycle is always engaging students, trying to find what they are interested in and raising their natural curiosity. Then making them explore the topics, so get more involved in the understanding of the topic. Then we can also explain the topics and the material to them, but also we can involve them, trying to provide an opportunity to build a deeper understanding. Then we need to elaborate those explanations. So we can challenge and extend students' understanding by engaging them into new experiences and activities. But then finally, we will need to evaluate them. And in this phase, students even can determine what they have learned and what they understood. And because this is a cycle based on the evaluation, everything goes back to the first stage where we need to engage our students, but based on the findings of our evaluation, so we can build in the results of those evaluations in the next round of the cycle. Probably if you have seen any of my presentations before, you have seen these slides or a similar slide to this. This is the teaching cycle. It's much more simple than the previous one. We always start from planning when we want to teach something. So we definitely need to do a lot of planning, and there are certain phases, certain criteria for the planning, of course. Then we are implementing those that we have planned, and then we get to the evaluation phase. And part of the evaluation is assessment, of course. And the next phase of planning is based on these results of the evaluation. So it's also a teaching cycle. When we do a course and when we repeat a course, or when we do another course, we always have to build on the previous experiences and results. Now, some of the fundamental questions about assessment. First of all, we need to define what is assessment. Of course, in education, the term refers to the methods or tools that we educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness and learning progress of the students. Of course, we also need to talk about what is the importance of assessment. It helps students to learn. It also helps to determine whether or not they understood the course material. And most of the time, it also helps motivate students. Even with negative or worse results, it can also help motivate students to be better next time. Now, the 5 main principles of assessments are that it needs to be practical, it has to be reliable, it needs to be valid, authentic, and it also needs to have a washback. And by washback, we need the expected test effects on the students. It can be also positive or negative. The 5 levels of assessment in higher education, as we determine in institutional level, on an institutional level, the first level or the lowest level is basically assessing student learning within courses. Then a higher level of this is when we assess student learning across courses. Then we can assess courses, we can assess the whole programs, and finally, in the highest level, we can assess the institutions. We will talk about assessing students in this webinar. So what is the purpose of assessment in higher education? There are different purposes, of course, but usually, most of the time, it is gathering relevant information about students' performance, and also determine students' interest to make judgments about their learning process. After getting all these information together, we as instructor, we can reflect on each student's level of achievement, and we can customize our teaching plans accordingly for the next courses or the future. So basically, this is an evaluation system where we can compare the performance of students to each other and towards a set goal. What are the main steps in the assessment process? As you can see, we can see another cycle here. So in teaching and learning, there are a lot of cycles, of course. And this shows a systematic cycle of assessment. And the first point or the first step is always clearly defining and identifying the learning outcomes. Of course, this is the main first step in each process of learning and teaching. Then we need to develop the methodology, so select appropriate assessment measures and assess the learning outcomes. Then we will need to gather the evidence and also interpret it, so we have to analyze the results. And finally, we can implement the change based on the previous results, so we can adjust or improve the programs for the following years or the next year. When we talk about different types of assessment, if you read papers about it or research papers, there are very different approaches, and I just would like to mention a few here. So, for example, there is one approach which mentions 4 types of assessment. There is one other approach which mentions 9 types of assessment. So as you can see, quite detailed forms. Also, there is one which builds on each other, so formative, interim, and summative assessment. But today I just would like to focus on one approach which identifies assessment as 3 ways or 3 types. One is for assessment for learning, in which the teachers use assessment as a tool to find out as much as they can about what their students know and what they can do, what confusions they have, what preconceptions they have, or what gaps in the knowledge they might have. So assessment for learning can be named as formative learning as well, but we will talk about it in more detail. Assessment as learning is basically focused on the students and their learning process. So, and also as a process of metacognition. So when students are monitoring what they are learning, they can use from this monitoring to make adjustment and adaptations and improvements what they are thinking and how they are thinking and how they are learning. So basically they use assessment as a tool for learning. And finally, we can mention assessment of learning, where we refer to strategies where we want to know what students actually know, what they have acquired from the course, whether or not they have met the curriculum outcomes or the goals, and maybe even to give them certificates or make decisions about their placements or future programs. So I will talk about these a little bit more in the next few minutes. So as I said, assessment of learning can be mentioned as or named as summative assessment. Assessment for learning could be formative assessments, and assessment as learning could be also formative assessment. But I just would like to mention some research papers. I've read some papers not very long ago about how tests are used by students and what effect they can have, and it shows that the effect and usefulness of these tests in the process of learning are much more effective than just reciting text or so, because it provides a deeper learning for students, deeper understanding of what they are doing. And also there is a keyword or a key definition called retrieval fluency. By doing many tests, students will acquire practice of recalling the information. So they will be much quicker when they are doing normal tests, if they are practicing with tests and trying to recall their understanding and knowledge with testing. And it also results in long-term retention. And research shows that all these 3 purposes should be combined in an assessment plan. So none of them should be left out. But remember, when you are planning, try to plan well so the assessment doesn't fail like in this flying school for ducks, where the duck assessed the assessment itself or the test itself and it failed. Of course, it is a joke, but it has a meaning behind it. So let's see one by one. Assessment of learning. So this is usually a type of summative assessment that aims to reflect students' knowledge of a given area and giving them a grade. And an example can be a final test at the end of the semester, and it will show how much the students have learned through the course. Assessment for learning could be a type of formative assessment, and it aims to provide the teachers with the data to be able to change the learning process while it is happening, or adjust the learning process if it's necessary while it is happening. So a formative assessment is usually, or most of the time, is when students are learning, while students are learning and doing the course, and we are trying to see what they are learning and how they are learning. So some examples could be like class observations, ungraded quizzes, which helps us to understand the students' progression without the stress for students to fail or not. We also can gather information through worksheets that students are doing and then adjust our work during the course. And of course, there is assessment as learning, as I mentioned. This is also a formative assessment, but it aims for students to take an active role in the learning process. And this is done by monitoring their own progress. They can use feedback, they can use results of assessment, maybe even tests, to make adjustment to their own learning. And this will empower students to be more independent in learning. And this can be very, very useful for them. When giving a feedback on written tasks, for example, we can use, for example, codes which will indicate a mistake. So without giving the correct answer for the students, we just call their attention that there is a mistake there. You need to find out why that answer is incorrect. So we will make them do self-reflection on their own learning process. And for the next time, most probably, when we use that same code for the incorrect answers, they will think and remember how the first time they made the mistake, and they will learn from that. So the aim of assessment as learning is to make students learn by self-reflection and also make them independent in their learning process. So let's see what is the difference between formative and summative assessment. And let's start with formative assessment. So in formative assessment, of course, the aim is to monitor student learning, to provide ongoing feedback. As I said, we are doing this during the course usually. We are trying to improve teaching and learning as well. And we try to help students identify their strengths and weaknesses. And we try to find them the places where they need improvement. And also we try to help the teachers, the instructors, to recognize where students are struggling and maybe address problems immediately after recognizing it. Formative assessment types are usually low stakes assessment types, like for example, concept maps, or creating a portfolio, maybe asking students to write notes for us, like what they understood, or if they have any questions when they are going out of the classroom, and handing those slips of papers to us, or maybe doing presentations, comments on discussion boards, peer or self-assessment, and project work. When we talk about the difference, we also need to talk about the summative assessments, where the aim is to evaluate the student learning of a certain unit of the material, and also to compare it against some standard or benchmark. Summative assessments are usually high stakes assessments like midterm exams, final projects, papers, end term exams, and so on. And these also can be used formatively when we want to develop courses in subsequent courses, and also use it as a guide for improving our work in the future. Of course, we have talked about the differences, but we also need to talk about the similarities and what we can use from both. The first and most important is that both are ways to assess. So there's nothing wrong about any of those. Questioning strategies need to be addressed. Both need to be used to evaluate a student effectively. So if you really want to see how your students are progressing, both ways, formative and summative assessments, are recommended. Both can be used for student feedback, and both can be very useful in future planning, future lesson planning. You can read about this article in the link below, and I forgot to mention that these slides will be shared later on. So what are the benefits of formative assessments? Just a few to mention here, but probably the most important ones are that they have defined learning goals usually. They have improved academic achievement. They enhance student motivation and engagement because they really have to work on their own learning process. Also, we can get focused and targeted feedback. We can achieve personalized learning experiences with these. And also we can get self-regulated learners at the end or during the learning process, of course. And just to mention that we have about how specific we need to be with the feedback. Of course, this is just a cartoon, but it will call your attention. Probably you will remember it more, to be very specific on feedback when you are doing formative assessment with your students. One example from MIT, from the US. MIT is very famous of doing very focused work and also very effective assessment work with students. And the main idea is that they are always questioning. So questions are very important, and classroom discussions are very important. And when we are talking about questioning, it is very important that that teachers or instructors need to ask reflective questions, thoughtful and reflective questions, which make students think, and also giving them adequate time to respond. Of course, that is also very important. So the strategy usually goes like this: the instructors invite students to discuss a certain topic or their ideas in pairs or small groups, and then they ask they ask to share with each other. So this think, pair, share process is the first part of the learning process. Then usually students present several possible answers to a question, and they vote on the best one or the most popular ones. Then they will write their understanding. They write down what they understood from the concepts, and they summarize the main ideas they have taken from the lecture or the discussion. And finally, they practice by doing a few problems, solving problems or questions. If you want to read about this type of assessment, you can go to MIT's website and you will be able to read about their formative assessment. I would like to give another example from a friend of mine who is a teacher of, a professor of marketing at the University of Pécs in Hungary. And what she does usually is a country study with her students, where students will need to choose a country and sell it to investors, of course, fictional investors. And these investors are played by the other students outside in the class. And for this country study, they will need to do a steep analysis. If you're interested in what a steep analysis is, that there is a link for that. So they will need to answer some questions about the certain country that they have chosen. And based on these findings, they will need to persuade the investors that they invest in their countries. Of course, students at the end will need to present their ideas and hand in their presentation in a Word document. And the assessment is mainly based on some criteria which are given to the students beforehand. So the students will know what they will be assessed on, and they can go following those assessment criteria. For example, how many points the presentations refers to, how elaborate is the analysis, how well the presentation has been prepared. And these criteria is given to them in a rubric. And based on this rubric, they will be able to assess each other, and also the professor will be able to assess them. And while we are talking about rubrics, I just would like to mention this type of tool that you can use for formative assessment. It is a scoring guide used to evaluate the quality of students' constructed responses. So basically, it is a set of criteria which helps the grading process. They usually contain the evaluative criteria, quality definitions for those criteria, and the scoring strategy. They are often presented in a table format, and I will just show you two examples of this. And it can be used by the teachers and also by peer students when marking, and also when they are planning their work. Rubrics have shown very positive impacts on students' learning, probably because when they have these criteria beforehand, they can use it as a basis for their work. And also it has a possibility to provide personalized feedback, and students can take an ownership of their own progress. And as I said, it can be also used for student self-assessment or peer assessment, not only for instructor assessment. And just two examples very quickly from different disciplines. Some of them are very elaborate, like this one. So you can see the different levels, novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished. And we also have the different criteria there, like research quality, writing ideas, content creativity, and so on. And in each grid, in each rubric, you will see different descriptions matched to that particular level. In another example, you will be able to assess critical thinking skills, content or subject knowledge, participation, coherence and organization, mechanics. So this probably could be also used for a general course assessment. Now, what are the benefits? So we talked about a lot about formative assessments, But what the benefits of summative assessments are, because there are, of course, a lot of benefits of this too. Because summative assessments are very well known, we are usually very familiar with them. They also show if students have understood the materials, if they have made the achievement. They also make academic records. They boost individual confidence. The weak areas can be identified very easily. Training success can be measured easily. And also, of course, they are also tools for evaluation. And it doesn't only measures the students, but it also measures the educator performance, and it can gain a better understanding for the institution about what is happening in the classroom or in the courses, in the programs. When we are talking about assessment, whether it's formative or summative, you need to consider individual needs and capabilities. So don't forget about those students who have disabilities, learning difficulties, or different learning types. I'm sure you have seen this cartoon about the different abilities and the same exam. Just please remember when you are planning any kinds of assessment that there are different types of students, of course. Now let's see a few tips on assessment strategies. I wouldn't like to talk about all of them, but just to highlight a few of them. So what simple tips we can use. So I've already talked about questioning, and when you are questioning students, think about open-ended questions that gets them writing or talking. These are much better than closed-end or multiple choice test, for example. When you give them an open-ended question, you make them think, and that's the most important part of teaching, of course. I just would like to highlight think, pair, share method that I was talking about when we were talking about the MIT example. Students, when they are sharing their ideas, can learn a lot better and much more easily. Also, the 12th one, for example, the 3-to-1 method, like 3 things I learned, 2 things I want to know, 1 question, could be also a feedback. When students write those down at the end of a lesson, for example, it can also give me a feedback as an instructor, how much they learned, how much they understood, and what they are curious about or what they didn't understand. Or I mentioned ticket out the door, so they can hand in their questions or their reflections at the end of the lessons. Or one more, peer instruction can be really helpful. Those of you who have seen any of my previous presentations, probably you remember that I mentioned the name of Eric Mazur, the Harvard University physics professor. He's an advocate of peer instruction, and you can find a lot of information and even a very good and informative blog about peer instruction and how they are using and how different people are using the peer instruction method with their students. So these are just a few tips and strategies that I wanted to mention. But if you want to read more about these, you can go to the link below and read more about these strategies. Now let's talk a little bit about online assessment, because this is a very actual and hot topic in institutions right now. And probably online assessment will gain more and more space in the future. I just would like to mention a very interesting and very useful video presentation of two US professors who are sharing their ideas and also their expertise and experiences about what they found about online exams. I wouldn't like to tell you the whole presentation because you can watch them under that link on our website. But I just would like to highlight a few of them. It really helps if you give exams during scheduled class time. So when students know exactly when they have to start the exam and when they are going to finish, and it's usually in their schedule. Also, or it's in their usual schedule, sorry. Also, if you give them a practice quiz online before the exam, it will immensely help them to understand and see how it will work. Also, assigning a lot of homework for them before doing the test or the online exam will help them immensely. Although students don't like doing homework, of course, who likes doing homework? But it really can help them to prepare and see how things will be working at the exam. Giving a practice quiz also helps you as an instructor to see how students are performing, what they are struggling with, and perhaps maybe you need to adjust the time for them. And this is what happened to one of my professors in Kazakhstan. This semester he tried online exams for the first time, and it was really helpful for him to do a practice quiz before the real one, because he just realized that he simply has to give more time for his students, or maybe even just give them a smaller number of questions for the real test. You can use different exam formats. Be creative. You can even use smaller quiz results and summarize the results at the end. Ask complex and specific questions. If you want to eliminate and reduce cheating, the more complex and more specific questions you ask, the less chance there is for cheating, for example. And the more you understand about students' thinking and understanding of their learning. A few things about deterring cheating in an online test, because it's always a concern for educators. We also have a very nice article about this, so I just would like also just to mention a few highlights here. For example, when you are trying to deter cheating or reduce the cheating possibilities, try to define the expectations and academic integrity policies. What policies your institution has for the case of cheating. You can use proctored exams. Proctoring is a hot topic these days because there are a lot of pros and cons. Of course, students are usually very against proctored exams, but it can really help institutions to make sure that they eliminate cheating in their exams. There are tools like Lockdown Browser, like in our MyLab e-learning system with Pearson. We have a built-in tool which doesn't allow students to click anywhere else, but they have to do the quiz or the test. Maybe embedding text matching software where you are asking for essay type of tests. Maybe tools like Turnitin or plagiarism seeking programs can really help you. You can offer low-stake quizzes, just like I mentioned before, and use those results as a summary of the students' final grade. You can also assign collaborative learning activities. And with that, you can also reduce the possibility of cheating. Now, a few tips for students how to prepare for an assessment. Of course, these are just a few very simple and very obvious, but I just would like to encourage you to share these ideas with students. We have all been there. We have done lots of exams when we were students. So we know how to deal with them. But when you are students, you just don't think about these. So being prepared is very evident. But for some students, it's just not very evident, and they don't realize how important it is. Most of them do, of course, but sometimes we need to highlight this. So being ready, having read the assigned materials, making notes, doing homework and quizzes, that's very important. Practicing, doing homework again, trying to do practice tests and assignments. I've already talked about this, that the more tests you are doing, the easier it will be in the real situation, and the quicker you will be able to bring forward that knowledge that you have. Also, be well rested. I'm sure you have been in that situation. I have been in that situation, of course, when you studied all night before an exam, and by the time you got there, you were dead tired and exhausted. And of course, the result was probably not very good. You can make sure that if you make sure that you are well rested before that, there is less chance that you will arrive exhausted to the exam. Also, trusting yourself, being well prepared, but also have trust in your own abilities is very important. So somehow you will need to boost your self-confidence as well. Be present. Focusing on what you're doing is very important. So, for example, if you have your smartphone on and you constantly get messages and such things, it will distract your mind and distract you from focusing. So try to shut out all the potentially disturbing elements and focus on what you have to do. And also, trust yourself, but do not underestimate the importance and the difficulty of the assignment. So read everything, take all assignments seriously, and allow yourself time to revise at the end before submitting it. I'm sure you have all been there as educators. You have done a lot of exams. Give some examples from your own experience. So for example, once when I was at university, I had to repeat an exam at the end of a very busy exam term because I was simply exhausted and I just couldn't recall anything at the exam. So I had to repeat it again. And I just gave myself a few days rest, and it did wonders on my brain. I knew everything at the second exam. So the examiner was just very surprised that, I could answer all the questions, whereas in the first time, and at the first time I couldn't answer anything. But the second time, my brain rested a little bit, and then I could recall everything very easily. So give your students such examples if you have something from your own life. It will make them understand much more easily how they should prepare and how they will do the best. When creating online tests, I just would like to give you a few tips. You can use the built-in test creator of your learning management system. I'm sure you have such a learning management system where you have such built-in test creators, but you can also use publisher test banks and test creator programs. We at Pearson have such things, and those who are using our textbooks will know that we have ready-made test banks and the test creator program, which I will show you in a minute. But you can also find test creator programs on the internet. It's full of very useful tools. And when you get these presentations, you will find this link. And under that link, you will find loads and loads of such test creator programs. Some of them you will have to pay a small fee, but most of them are free of charge, and you can create different kinds of tests very easily with them. So when you are using a Pearson textbook, you will definitely know that there will be test banks, ready-made test banks, and also a little program called Test Generator, which will help you to create the course or the course test for you. It will help you quickly create paper and online quizzes as well. And because the test items supplement the content in the textbook, you don't need to think about different questions if you don't want to. You just have to select the items from the ready-made test banks. And because these test bank correlates with the book, you only have to go to the chapter or the learning objectives you want to cover, and you can create your test very easily. You can also customize your test as little as or as much as you prefer. You can use the different types of questions in the test bank, and you can also create your own content. As I said, you can quickly and easily create these tests, but also multiple versions of these tests. There is a built-in tool which lets you automatically pool or randomize questions and give the same test to students, but in different versions, in different formats. Also, you can save it in your preferred format, either in paper or online test, and it's very easily to integrate the online test into your learning management system of the institution. If you would like to learn more about how to download TestGen, Pearson TestGen, and also how to use those test files and create a test, you can go to this YouTube video and watch a few minutes explanation about it. But also, if you want a training, we are very happy to provide you a personal training session on it. Please contact your Pearson representative in Central and Eastern Europe, either me or my colleagues, and we will be very happy to help you with that. So just a few screenshots on how TestGen works and how it looks like. As you can see, it's very, very simple looking. There are two main windows in here. On the left-hand side, you will see the ready-made test items from the book, chapter by chapter, and organized into different criteria. So the multiple choice questions, open-ended questions, essay types, whatever there is available. And it doesn't only have the correct answers, but also it has information about the difficulty level. Sometimes it has the learning objectives or AACSB criteria. So whatever you can imagine, there will be there, and depending on the book, of course. And the main idea is to have the test items on the left-hand side and have your test on the right-hand side, and just drag and drop the item from the left to the right, whichever you want. So basically dragging and dropping the items. You can also choose multiple questions from a certain chapter by chance. So the computer automatically can choose a given number of test items for you, and then you just have to delete those that you don't want to put in your test. The answers will be at the end of the test, so you will have the answer key printed together with the test, of course. You can also print different variations of the same test, as I mentioned. So when you want to create one test in different variations, you only have to decide on the number of forms that you want to create. So maybe group A, B, C, D. So you can create four forms. And you can decide if you want to keep the question order, preserve the number values or the answer order, and the computer will print it out as you want, in as many forms as you want. Finally, I just would like to mention that, as I said before, you can save it in different formats. So you can either save it as a printed test in RTF formatted text file, or HTML, PDF, or maybe ready-made for your Moodle class. So you can save it in those different formats that you can see here. Once again, if you're interested in how test banks and TestGen works at Pearson, please let us know. We will be very happy to show it to you and give you guidance on how to do such tests. Finally, I just would like to mention that I have selected a few or collected a few references and links, and also Rubrics websites for you to help your work. And if you would like to learn more about what we are doing, please visit our website, pearson.com/UK. That's our European website. And also, if you would like to get more ideas about how to work online with your students, there is an updated website for working and learning online during a pandemic. Check this website out. You will find loads and loads of useful resources, videos, webinars, lectures, articles, and so on. We will upload the slides under the video, and also if you would like to have the slides to yourself, to your inbox, to your mailbox, please write me an email and I will be very happy to send it to you. If you have any ideas for more training topics or have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us. We will try to work on more interesting topics that you would be probably interested in. So don't hesitate to give us some tips and hints. Thank you for your attention. Stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.